It's still Politics Thursday on AM Chat, and we're glad to have you rejoin us. We would be doing more of an interactive conversation of this segment on the program rather than analysis. We do have our guest right here with us in the studio in person of Barrister Wofai, a legal practitioner who is highly skilled in the business. But in the meantime, we'll be x-raying the major issues making the front headlines of different papers. I'm starting with the Nigerian Tribune. The headline say on the Nigerian Tribune says Nigeria should increase VAT rates. Nigeria should increase VAT rates, IMF. That's on page 10. Supports fuel subsidy removal. Task federal government on careful borrowing. All of that is coming from the president of IMF, and that's on page 10 of the Nigerian Tribune. We're ready for diversification of economy. That's from the Senate President, Senator Bukola Saraki. NFF top staff, Abubakar shot dead. That's on page 45. NFF top staff, Abubakar shot dead. That's rather a pathetic and sad one. New electricity tariff takes off on February 1. That's on page 11 of the Nigerian Tribune. New electricity tariff takes off on February 1. Ambode appoints Fagbon as LASU Vice Chancellor. That's on page 41. Fagbon is being appointed as LASU Vice Chancellor by the Governor of Lagos State. New fuel price. DPR gets tough on airing matters. DPR gets tough on airing matters. For whatever that headline is meant for, you should find that on page 15 of the Nigerian Tribune. Ex-FIRS boss Omogu Okaru to head Lagos 25 billion naira employment trust fund. Lagos 25 billion naira entrustment trust fund is to be headed by the ex-FIRS boss Omogu Okaru. There are several stories in the Nigerian Tribune, but I'd like us to touch very briefly on excuse me, I'd like us to touch very briefly on the IMF. I mean, the president was here, or the chairman of the IMF was here a few days ago, and she talked about lots of issues, but she was very particular about the fact that Nigeria is a great nation, and our economy is the strongest in Africa, so she's not coming here to talk to us about borrowing. And I'm glad that she was very emphatic on that. But from all she said, and then she talked about removal of fuel subsidy, what do you think that portends for Nigeria if an international body is coming to Nigeria and saying that?
Well, it's been obvious to many of us for a very long time that we actually need to remove this fuel subsidy. But the fuel subsidy removal was not the problem. Even when the people demonstrated the last time, it was not so much about removing fuel subsidy, but about what are they going to do with the money they are saving from the fuel subsidy. All right, before they remove the subsidy and the people share the money among themselves. So Nigerians were not going to take that. But it is obvious now that we can't continue to pay trillions of naira every year to what I call phantom fuel importers for price of fuel that has fallen all over the world. So right now there is no subsidy really to give. Right now the price of fuel has fallen to like $30, $32 in the world market. So what are we subsidizing? So really there is no subsidy, and that is why they are saying they will remove it and even still reduce the price of fuel at the pump to 86 naira 50 kobo, which makes sense. So the IMF thing, and I love when you say good thing that he said that we don't need loan. Nothing is bad with loan by itself. Although I'm glad she said we don't need a loan to take out our issues, because the IMF is not so much about loan. People misunderstand that. The IMF is more about economic restructuring. You have to understand, people hate IMF and they complain about IMF, but the time you only bring in IMF when your economy is on life support. All right, so obviously somebody is not going to come in, a doctor is not going to come in when you're on life support and be giving you palliatives. It's going to cut out some very serious stuff from your body. Okay, that's what IMF does. So their job is to help us restructure. And the woman has come here and said, listen, we don't need to give you loan because the fundamentals in your country is there. What we will give you advice on is how to restructure your economy, how to diversify your income generation, and all those stuff that we all know. Those of us who comment on this stuff, we know that's where we need to go, because people focus on oil, but we forget that oil actually gives us only 40% of our GDP. The remaining 60% is from the private sector. So what we should be doing is actually providing infrastructure so that the Mama Lati that is doing, the Mukaila that is doing tire on the street does not have to spend that 1,000 naira that is making from changing tires on fuel to fuel his generator.
But still talking about this IMF, I mean, yes. when the hue and cry for the loan thing started after the budget was released, and
yes.
you know, the exorbitant amount for this budget that was earmarked for different ministries and of course different projects.
Yes.
If you're looking at that, okay, the hue and cry from Nigerians, the president, with the country, let me not say the president, the country is already indebted to so many other nations.
Yes.
Now, the higher the loan goes, the more at risk we are.
Yes.
So if there was this hue and cry from Nigerians that, okay, we shouldn't be indebted, and then she was coming to re-emphasize, do you think there was a connect or?
No, yes, Mr. President himself has said we'll look inwards, and I think that's what we should do first, because I think largely that 60% that I keep talking about is largely on tap, because majority of the big income earners in Nigeria do not pay tax. Sadly, the only people that really pay tax is Mama Lati that is selling, that is doing a pure water on the road, because last month all those people who arrest them and they collect all these levies from them. Those are the ones really paying taxes. The real big boys who are making those multi-millions every year, most of them don't pay tax, including our ministers. You saw during the screening process where one of the ministers, I think was Akpabio, that was really trying to make a big deal out of it, where of all of them, there's only one man, Okechukwu Enilama, who made about 20 million that year and paid over 5 million in taxes. And everybody was surprised.
Who's supposed to monitor that process? If a minister doesn't pay tax or a senator doesn't pay tax, there's supposed to be a regulatory body. Maybe the Internal Tax Force Committee.
There is a regulatory body. They are just not doing their job. I'm just saying the time has now come for them to unchain Fowler, the person that is in the FIRS now. He did a great job in Lagos in making sure lots of people start getting to the tax bracket, and they generated a lot of internal revenue just from that. So imagine if we do that on a global level. Nigeria can actually get a lot of this money that we need to do what we need by making sure the laws we do have in place function. A lot of people forget that Nigeria has one of the most draconian tax laws in the world. Our tax rate is very high. It's because people are not paying it that we don't know. So if they start enforcing the law, particularly on the big corporations, all these billions and trillions that we need will come in, and of course, if we can get the money that all the Dasukis of this world are sharing, if we can get those back, we don't need to go borrow money. The IMF woman knows the deal, okay? She knew that all the money that is being taken out of Nigeria, they have records, they know who has them, they know where they are. So why would they borrow us money when we will take our money and go hide it abroad?
Okay. Yeah, I'll take the next paper, which is Punch. And the major headline here says, EFCC traces 400 million naira to army officers' account. You find details of that story on page 2 and 7 of the Punch newspapers. We are going to prosecute more influential persons. That is coming from Mago. 9 to die in Kano for blasphemy. That's coming from Sharia. You'll get details of that story on page 7 of the Punch newspapers. U.S. donates 24 special war vehicles to Army. You find details on page 7 of Punch newspapers. 2,000 Visa phone workers fired as MTN complete acquisition. Details you find on page 30 of the Punch newspapers. I got 150,000 to install Radio Biafra transmitter. So that's coming from the suspect. You find details of that story on page 3 of the Punch newspapers. IMF wants flexible exchange rate, higher VAT for Nigeria. You find details on page 27. 5 held for planned attack on Jonathan's house. You find details on page 3. Nimasa collected revenue in dollars, remitted naira. That's coming from federal government. Okay, let's start from there. Nimasa collected revenue in dollars and remitted